Hello, welcome back to the pod book. In this chapter, I want to return to discuss epistemology, which is how we know stuff. And in particular, I want to focus on a epistemological mistake made often by spiritual folk. Certainly it's a mistake that I've made myself in the past, and in becoming conscious of that mistake, I see how important it is to avoid it. And that's what I want to explore. So here's the essential error. I know that, fill in the blank. I'll give two examples from my life, one when I was young and one when I was not so young. I know that my guru is Lord of the universe because I'm experiencing it. I know that everything exists in consciousness because I'm experiencing it. And what I want to say is this is epistemologically naive. And of course, everyone can claim it for their particular theory. You know, I know many fundamentalist Christians who will tell me that I know that Jesus is the Lord because I'm experiencing it. What makes my claim that my guru is the Lord different to that? Well, there's no difference, is there? Apart from it was mine, and I was experiencing this. And this naive epistemology causes endless confusion in spirituality, with people making all these different claims of revelation with the authority of experience. And what I want to try and point out in this chapter, that I've become caught up in what I call a self-verifying loop. So that their way of ideating the nature of reality is creating an experience. My guru is Lord. Jesus has redeemed me. Everything exists in consciousness, whatever it is, that the way that the person, me and the couple of the examples I was giving, is ideating. I'll explain exactly again what I mean by that in a minute, but is ideating the nature of reality, is giving rise to the experience I'm having, and then I'm claiming that my experience, which is created by the very theory, proves the theory. And you've got a loop in which you are claiming you know something based on, you know the theory is true, but the theory is creating that experience. That's what I mean by the self-verifying loop. So the first thing I want to get is that any experience we're having can be mistaken. Doesn't mean it is mistaken. Look, those three ideas I shared earlier, they're not necessarily wrong. I'm just claiming that that one is experiencing something does not prove they are right. Different. So any experience we're having can be mistaken. I mean, a straightforward sensational one. I remember going to a science fair with my kids when they were younger, and they had this experiment where there was a plastic hand and you slipped your hand into a bag nearby where you couldn't see it, and then you hit the plastic hand and you felt it in your real hand because your system mistakenly thought you were hitting your hand. You felt the pain. You can, something as tangible as that. I was listening to a doctor the other day. He was saying he'd had a man come in from a building site, and he'd got this huge nail through his foot. He'd stood on this nail, and it had come right through his big boot and through his foot, and he was in agony. It's just when they took the boot off, the nail hadn't gone through his foot. It had just gone between his toes. But his system thought it had gone through his foot and therefore put him into pain. Why? Because better to feel the pain and act than to be mistaken. To not act on the fact that you might have a nail through your foot. Same with the hand example. So all I'm trying to point out is, even with something as instinctual as physical pain, that you're experiencing it does not prove your theory. My theory is there's a nail through my foot. Turns out to be not right, even though I'm experiencing the pain of it. Okay, hopefully I've got that across. Now let's apply that to spiritual experience and see where it's the same. Now, one of the things I'm most proud of with this whole philosophy that I'm sharing with you is that there's one ontology. Everything with any quality at all is the process of the realization of new possibilities in ever more emergent ways. The differentiation of the undifferentiated. And there's one epistemology that right from the simplest system to you and I, every system is discerning those differentiations in some way. And that can be an electromagnetic discernment on the level of matter, for example, or it can be basic sensory discernment on the level of life, which we experience still have that as our instincts. And it can be ideational discernment on the level of psyche, which is where we've evolved to. And what I want to claim is how you process the universe creates your experience. Every experience is the result of how you, as a particular system with your particular instincts and your particular ideas, how you sense and make sense of the universe, including sensing and making sense of yourself. And when I talk about sensing, please remember I'm including within that psi sensing, which is the idea that the psyche is a sense. It is reading the system, reading itself. It's reading the past. It's reading passivity. It's reading information. So we are sensing and psi sensing and making sense. And how do we do that from the most primitive biological level right up to the most sublime? When we sense, we take the information and we categorize it. There's a green plant behind me. How do I know? Because I've got the categories green and plant. Now, I'm not conscious that I'm categorizing it. And this is key. I'm conscious of what I categorize, not the categorizing. And on the level of the psyche, those categories are ideas, which is why I can say to you, yes, that's a green plant, because I have the idea green and I have the idea plant, and I am categorizing it in that way. And then from sensing to go, this is what I'm experiencing, it's this, not that, it's a green plant, not a blue elephant. It's not anything other than a green plant. That's how I know I'm categorizing it. I put it into a narrative because everything is process, and that's the making sense. So I could go, yeah, I put that plant there to make a nice background for me to make this pod book. Now, all of that, the sensing and the making sense, requires me to ideate, to use ideational categories to say it is this, as opposed to anything else. And this is happening with we're doing this with everything. I mean, you think of something as seemingly abstract as listening to a piece of music. You're ideating it, or you're categorizing it, both on the instinctual and on the ideational level. So you can tell this note is higher than that one, or louder than this one. And then you can follow the melody, the process, and you can have associations with it. Makes me feel happy, makes me feel sad, whatever the piece of music is. And it's equally true with spiritual experience, which is where we're psi-sensing the oneness of everything, for example. I am categorizing that because otherwise, that's how I know it's the oneness I'm experiencing and not the separateness. When I make that shift, I am processing the universe differently. That's why I experience the shift. So that the shift, if I do it now, that's different to where I was when I was focused primarily on talking to the camera to communicate with you. And then, oh, there it is. So you shift your processing. And part of that is I'm ideating what's happening differently. And once again, to repeat, I experience what I ideate, not how I ideate. I'm not necessarily conscious of how I do that. Or no, in this case, because this is my area of expertise, I am conscious of how I do that. And let me make another point which I've made before, but it can't say it enough, because this is a major confusion often. Ideating, putting things into ideational categories, so you know it's this, not that, it's not thinking. Thinking is monologuing. It's imagining talking to yourself. And that can be all sorts of different. It can be as talking to yourself can be as diverse as talking to somebody else. But it's how often how we reflect. So we can reflect on our ideas. I'm inviting you to do that now. Through talking and through thinking. It's a great way to reflect on our ideas. But ideating is not thinking. Ideating is an unconscious process through which we put things into categories for sensing and making sense. Thinking can be how we analyze those categories and maybe how we change them. All right. Let me get into an example so you can really get, I think, the simplicity of what I'm saying. So if I took the example, Jesus is the Lord who redeemed me, for me, that would be easy. I would feel like when someone says that to me, I feel like, oh, yeah, is that what you're experiencing? Or is that a theological position that you have, a theory, and you're experiencing it because you believe it? Is it actually what you're experiencing, or could you understand what you're experiencing? You're experiencing something, clearly, and it's clearly important to you. But are there other ways to experience that? I think I can see that quite easily. But when it came to my own self-verifying loops, it wasn't so easy to see. It took me a long, long time before I could see it. Now I can see it. It's just absolutely obvious. So let's look at a key example for me, and you may be able to then see if you're doing this yourself. Now, one other thing, I've said it already, I'm going to say it again. I am not saying any of the ideas I'm exploring are right or wrong. I'm not saying Jesus isn't the Lord and Redeemer. I'm not saying my guru isn't actually God when I was young. I don't think that, but I'm not interested in right or wrong in this chapter. I'm interested in simply conveying the self-verifying loop. That your experience is not proof of your theory because your theory is creating your experience. That's it. So, for most people, actually I would say for everyone I've ever met, as you grow up, you think you are a human being experiencing an objective world. And that's a given fact. It's self-evident. How do you know? You're experiencing it. And then you may come across, as I did, this incredible idea that that's not true. That everything is actually arising in consciousness. Everything is a sensation in consciousness. And when you first come across that, for most people, for me, you have to work at it. What does that mean? And how can I experience it? And then if you keep working at it and you listen to it being said enough times and at some point, bang, you start getting it. And then if you keep focusing on it, you really get it. And then at some point, I found myself going, everything's arising in consciousness. It's self-evident. I know it's true because I'm experiencing it to be true. Well, hang on. Me and most people, I originally thought it was self-evident that I was a person experiencing the objective world. Now I seem to have forgotten that. Now it's self-evident. I'm experiencing the fact that it's all in consciousness. And what I want to say is, look, neither are self-evident. They're both ways that you can ideate this. It's not given which one of those is true. And the self-verifying loop is when you think it is, whichever one. Rather than seeing, oh no, what I'm experiencing is a result of how I ideate. So it's not self-evident. And then you're doing something else. Then you're looking at what's the most plausible way to interpret this. And for me, eventually, the most plausible way was to return to common sense and go, actually, I'm a person experiencing an objective world. That's actually more plausible than it all exists in consciousness. And particularly, I wanted to reject this idea, which I came across a lot, which was, if you are spiritually awake, you would know from experience that the philosophical idealism, it's all in consciousness, was true. You just know. It's just not true. What happens, they're both interpretations fit. You have to look at what's more plausible beyond your own experience, because it doesn't self-verify. Now, of course, that goes with a whole load of other ideas, like you're this presence of consciousness, the experiencer, something which is knowing everything and somehow knows itself, and that when you remove ideas, when there's no categorization, somehow this experience of being consciousness arises. Maybe it's true. I don't think so, but maybe it is. Could be wrong. But here's what I'm pretty damn confident of. That's all theory. None of it is given in experience. None of it is self-evident. Maybe right, maybe wrong. It's a way of ideating and needs to be evaluated as that. It is a way of ideating that works. You can experience it like that. You know, some ways of ideating just don't work. I cannot make it work that I'm ideating. I'm right now sitting on the back of an elephant in the Himalayas. That's not going to work. But I can do these other things. That can work. It's a way of sensing and making sense. Doesn't mean it's true. Doesn't mean it's false. And what's so odd about what happens with spiritual people like me in the past is that there's this great emphasis on being skeptical about everyday experience. This thing, this world you think you're experiencing, it's kind of an illusion. It's really not what you think it is. But completely naive about doing the same thing to spiritual perception, which is seen as self-evident, or it is now. So maybe I can just sort of touch on what's happened for me with that experience and why I shifted, which is, if I come into that, I did it earlier, of, okay, I ideate this as I'm this spacious presence of awareness, is the way I would put it. I'm the spacious presence of awareness, and all of these colors and shapes and forms and sounds are all arising, ideas, you know, in the sense of thinking, images. They're all arising within consciousness. Okay, that's one way of seeing this. And then there's another way of approaching the same experience with a different way of ideating and a different way of sensing and making sense. So if I shift now it's like, I'm this human being, and I am conscious of whatever I focus on, and I can expand, as it were, my focus, and I can focus on the fact that everything has the quality of being. And I'm back. Now I'm back. That big spacious quality is back, but it's no longer consciousness, and I'm not it in the way that I'm this conscious presence. I'm Tim. And I'm Tim, and there's a oneness of being, if you like, a field of essence, which is being differentiated into everything, including me. So my essential being is one with the being of everything, and I'm experiencing that. It's beautiful. Beautiful. Both experiences are beautiful. Amazing experiences to have. And both are ways that can work as ideating the moment. But as I've focused on the differences, the second becomes much more plausible to me, because I need to assume so much less. I don't need to assume I'm this strange presence of consciousness which is conscious of this, but not everything. Only this. and I can come up with, I have convoluted ways of explaining that, but it's to me now, and that's what this pod book's about, much simpler to go, there's one process of evolutionary emergence, that's the differentiation of the oneness of being, and I can experience that oneness of being and go, oh yeah, essentially I'm one with you and everything. And it's a powerful transformative experience. Okay, so what have I been attempting to get across in this chapter? That there's a naive assumption I often come across that I know something's true because I'm experiencing it. And that does not mean that you know it's true. Because there's a self-verifying loop, which is your ideation. Your ideation is the way of categorizing your relationship with the universe. So it creates your experience. It doesn't prove your experience. It is part of what makes you experience it this way, that you're categorizing it like this. I mean, it's not just your categorizations, it's also the thing you're categorizing, of course. It's the relationship between those two. And in terms of one of my focuses, which is the experience of awakening, the experience of awakening does not show you the ontological nature of reality. That is arising from your way of categorizing it. Hence, there are so many different ways of seeing what spiritual awakening is, and so many disagreements. So we need to be able to question our experience and to see that we could experience things in different ways by ideating in different ways. So I've said look, all experiences can be mistaken. I gave you the example of the guy with a nail through his foot on that basic physiological level. And no surprise, that goes right the way up to your spiritual experiences. So that nothing is given and nothing is self-verifying. And I've said, look, there's one epistemology, one ontology. Everything's a process of emergence, creating these systems, differentiations of the one. And every system is discerning the nature of the differentiations on its own level of emergence. And for us, that's the ideational categories with which we discern all the differentiations that exist. And I homed in on the example that was a big one for me. It's when I really saw my error was, it's all in consciousness. It's not self-evident. Maybe true. I don't think it is, but maybe it is. It's a respectable theory, but it's not given by the experience. Now, one of the things I find, one of the things troubles me about spirituality is the idea that I come across a lot, or the phenomena of the teacher, the guru, who has an absolute authority because he's having this experience. I'm having this special experience in which it's self-evident that what I say is just right. And it's not the views I object to so much, because we can all have different ways of understanding this, and the interaction between our different insights is what creates our collective wisdom. It's the supposed authority which they're delivered. Now, there's nothing wrong with the authority created by experience. Someone who's experienced at medicine has got that authority to be a doctor. True in every area of life. That's great. But here, the problem is that there is such an epistemological naivety that the people who are claiming these great insights are unconscious that their experiences prove nothing. They don't even see it. So that, for me, they cease to be a source of, they don't feel trustworthy. And when you see it, it's like, okay. So what I'm suggesting is something else, which is that we are evolving greater wisdom with which to discern the nature of this and ourselves in a more trustworthy way. And for me, what's exciting is that the last, whatever it is, 12 years of my life in which everything's turned upside down has blown me away, because it's been the most exciting, most intense period of that. And it's not easy always, but I thoroughly recommend it. There's a desire often to hold on to what we're certain of. I'm certain of this, I'm experiencing it, I've got my, But the evolution to greater wisdom, it comes through reflection. And a real advantage is when you can see no discernment is just given. Everything is up for grabs. And then we seek the best. We keep looking for, what is the best way I can find? And interacting with others, what is the best way I can find? How can I discern more wisely? And why I've stopped in this chapter to focus on the self-verifying loop is because it's not true that your experience proves your theory. And the self-verifying loop stops us becoming wiser, evolving beyond what we see at the moment to see more. And when we do see more, because the way that we categorize and ideate the environment is our relationship with the universe creates our experience of the universe, it means that we don't come into these more emergent experiences. So for me, the shift from that I described of it's all in consciousness to, oh no, it's all the oneness of being and I'm conscious of it. And we're evolving up and the super soul and all the things I've been sharing. These have been an expansion of my experience of what it is to be human. And that has helped me really understand why our lives really matter. And that matters so much that I have stopped everything in my life to create this pod book and do my best to share it with you.